In 1828, two men in Edinburgh got tired of digging up graves, so they started killing people instead. Their names were William Burke and William Hare. And to understand why what they did actually worked, why nobody caught on for months, you have to understand the world that made it possible. Not a world of monsters, a world of medical students. In the early 1800s, Edinburgh was one of the best places in Europe to study anatomy. Brilliant lecturers, packed classrooms. Students desperate to understand how the human body actually worked. There was just one problem. The law only allowed doctors to dissect the bodies of executed criminals, and executions were becoming rarer every year. Do the math. Hundreds of students, a handful of legal bodies. The gap between what medicine needed and what the law allowed didn't close. It widened year after year until it broke wide open. Enter the resurrection men. That's what people called the grave robbers who filled the gap. Men who'd sneak into cemeteries at night, dig up a fresh burial, and sell the body straight to an anatomy school. Legally, it existed in a strange gray zone. Stealing a body wasn't technically theft because a corpse didn't count as property. Steal the coffin, though, or the burial shroud. That was a crime. So the smart ones stripped the body bare and left everything else behind. Families fought back the only way they could. They hired guards to sit by fresh graves through the night. Cemeteries built stone watchtowers. Some families paid for heavy iron cages, called mort safes, to lock directly over a coffin until the body had decayed past the point of being useful to anyone, which only made bodies harder to get, and harder to get meant more valuable. That's the exact math Burke and Hare noticed. In late 1827, a lodger in Hare's boarding house died, still owing him rent. Instead of losing that money, Hare and his friend Burke had an idea. Sell the body instead. They carried it to a local anatomist, a well-known lecturer named Robert Knox, and walked away with more cash than either man had ever held at once. That was the moment everything changed. Digging up graves was slow, risky, exhausting, but renting rooms to travelers, feeding them, getting them drunk, that was something Burke and Hare already knew how to do. Over the next 10 months, they didn't dig up a single grave again. Instead, they lured people into their lodging house, got them intoxicated, and suffocated them. A method precise enough that it left almost no mark, and specific enough that it later got its own name: Burking. 16 people, 10 months. Sold one by one to the very same anatomist, who paid promptly, asked few questions, and reportedly told them he'd be happy to see them again whenever they had more to sell. It only ended when a lodger stumbled onto their latest victim's body before they could deliver it. Burke was hanged in front of a crowd of thousands. In a detail almost too fitting to invent, his own body was handed over for public dissection afterward. And his skeleton still stands in a museum in Edinburgh today. Hare walked free, testified against his partner, and vanished from history entirely. But here's the part that actually changed anything. The panic that followed didn't just end with an execution. It forced Parliament's hand. In 1832, Britain passed a new law that let medical schools legally use unclaimed bodies from workhouses and hospitals. Bodies nobody had come to claim. The black market that made Burke and Hare rich and made grave robbing a nightly fear for ordinary families disappeared almost overnight. Not because anyone got more honest, but because the law finally caught up to what medicine actually needed. Which means every anatomy class since 1832 exists on the other side of that horror. A legal, regulated supply built directly on top of a black market that ended in murder. Nobody set out to build modern medical training this way. It's just what happens when a system creates a shortage and leaves men desperate enough or cold enough to fill it.